ADHD is very much an iceberg, and the behaviours that we see at the top as parents, the behaviours that often we talk about, the things that challenge us, are so much at that very top of the iceberg. The things that are going on underneath are what are causing those behaviours at the top, are what making things difficult for our children. And if we don't see them, if we don't understand those challenges, we're never going to be able to deal with and support the challenges at the top of the iceberg, the things that we can see. And we really need to understand what's going on underneath. So I'm going to explain some of the challenges that our children are experiencing underneath the surface so that we can start to look at ways to support them and make life easier for them. Top of the list is poor working memory. This for me really is top of the list because I think it's a really hard one to get to grips with. This is the one that makes us feel like our children aren't listening to us. Why didn't they just get that instruction? Why didn't they get their coat and their shoes on when we asked them to do both things? Working memory is the challenge here. If working memory doesn't work, it makes life so hard. This is the thing that for me as an adult means if I don't write it down, it doesn't exist. I am not going to remember it. Which can often mean that we end up with expectations of our children way higher than even some of us adults who struggle with this. So if your child struggles with working memory, giving verbal instructions are going to be challenging. Telling them to put their coat on, put their shoes on, and then go out to the car is going to be challenging to remember all three of those. In school, working memory is used all the time. There is an expectation that they will be listening to the teacher, taking that in. Copying from the board relies on working memory because it allows you to read it, remember it, still remember it whilst you're writing it down before you look back up to the next piece. Working memory challenges really do make life difficult, and this can make things really hard for a child, especially a child who doesn't understand what's going on, why they can't remember this, or be able to put in place any tools to support themselves. The interest-based motivation system is a real challenge for those of us with ADHD. Getting started on a task because it's important, but I'm not really interested in doing it, or I can't really see the importance to me, is really challenging. It makes doing those boring tasks really hard to even get started on. And a lot of what we expect of children at school, for example, is about learning because this is important to them at some point later in their lives. It may not be of any interest to them right now, or a bit of it might be, but not that particular bit, and that's going to make it really hard for them to be able to get motivated by anything other than, I'm interested in this, I'm excited by it, which is why we see that when they're doing something that they love, their focus, getting started, is not a problem. Emotional dysregulation, really challenging. Now, this one's an interesting one, I think, because yes, struggling to regulate your emotions is a challenge for those of us with ADHD. Rejection sensitivity, I'm going to put those two both together because I think that one is also a challenge, and it often means that when something negative comes in, we have a much deeper emotional reaction to it than would otherwise be expected. And that has real challenges. I know as an adult, there are times where my emotional reaction doesn't match what my brain logically is telling me I should feel about this thing. And that, if it's hard for me as an adult, it's going to be challenging for a child to deal with. I think on top of that, though, we have to bear in mind that life is difficult for our children with ADHD. They are often expected to do things that they find hard, if not impossible. Refer back to working memory. How frustrating is it when somebody gives you an instruction, you can't remember it? They then tell you off for not listening, not caring, being lazy, whatever it is, but they know they're none of those things. They are just struggling. And that gives our children a valid reason to feel angry, to feel frustrated, to feel like they are not good enough, because that's often what they're being told. So I think we have to bear that in mind with emotional regulation. They're right to feel angry when they're being expected to do things that they simply can't do. Sensory overload is another one that can really go hidden and be really hard to understand if it's not something that you experience yourself. We cannot necessarily see or feel or hear the sensory experience of somebody. So if somebody is feeling overloaded by information coming in, by noise, by light, by what they're feeling inside, this is going to have an impact. Think about it if you've got toothache or some other real pain and you're trying to just get on with life through it. It's almost impossible because that pain sort of penetrates your mind and focuses everything on trying to deal with that pain. So every other input, you've got a really short fuse in that moment. And that's going to be the experience for some of our children every day who are feeling sensory overload from noise, lights, things going on around them. It's going to be a real challenge for them. Another challenge for our children is time blindness. Now, there's often the kind of ADHD joke about ADHD time. It's kind of now or just not now. That's the only time they can see. It's a bit of a joke, a bit of an exaggeration for some people, but for others, that really is the experience. And this means that when we tell our children 5 minutes, they may have no concept of what that is. They may not be able to feel what that time is. They may also not be able to consider the impact tomorrow. So if I do this today, it's going to feel better tomorrow. It's much harder for a child with ADHD to see that, to feel that. Much less saying to them, do well at school now is going to help you when you're an adult. That time is so far away, actually, for many of our children, not just those with ADHD. But that time blindness can be really challenging on the short term, the getting ready for school, the doing a task in school, you've got 5 minutes to finish up doing this before we go to the next thing, may not be something that all children are able to recognise. And we may need to make time visible in some of those situations. We can't underestimate the fatigue that comes from masking, the fatigue that comes from trying to fit in, trying to do the right thing, trying not to get in trouble in school. For some of our children, that is really important to them. Others will go the other way and will fight it with, well, I'm going to get in trouble anyway, so I may as well get in there first, and put forward behaviours that are not convenient to the adults around as a protection mechanism. Either way, these are going to be exhausting because they're always on the lookout for, what do I need to be doing? How do I need to be fitting in? How do I need to be behaving in this situation? They can't just relax and be themselves. They're constantly thinking, processing, working out what they need to be doing, saying, how they need to appear to people, and that is absolutely exhausting. And that's often why you hear references to things like social battery running out, that needs to just get home and not talk to anyone, be on their own. Sometimes that's the experience because that fatigue from masking can be so strong. And finally on this list is shame and anxiety. Now, these are not limited to ADHD by any means, but when our children are receiving negative comments, so when they're receiving comments about carelessness or lazy or being rude because they've not fully heard and processed an instruction, for example, or because they weren't able to sit still in a situation, or because they're anxious that that's what's going to happen. If they move, they're going to get told off. The strain of that can be really huge and have a detrimental effect on self-esteem and confidence. And that's going to have a real impact on everything else that your child's doing. Which means if we can support the other things and we can help our children to understand what's going on for them, what supports they need, so they can advocate for themselves, but also realise, so as an adult now, I can recognise when I've lost the thread of a conversation and be confident enough to say, actually, I've missed that bit, I've lost that, or can you confirm that in writing? Things like that just make life a little bit easier for me. If we can teach our children those things, even if the people around them don't provide what they need, and I recognise the challenges that we have in schools of getting schools to support our children, but if our children understand this is what I need and it's not being provided for me, we can help reduce that shame and anxiety and reduce that by understanding that actually if I had the tools I needed, I'd be able to do okay. When we recognise these hidden struggles that our children are experiencing, we can shift our perspective. Instead of saying, why won't they just? We can ask what's getting in their way. We can start to put support, scaffolding, strategies in place to help them to be their best selves. I strongly believe that all children will do well when they can. If we can give them the environment, the strategies and the tools to do well, they will do well. Understanding what's going on for our children is absolutely crucial. It's also important to recognise that our children are individuals, we are individuals. So there's never going to be just one answer. But when we can start to understand the challenge, then we can start to find the answers and work out which ones work for us. Now, I hope you found that useful. It's been a bit of a dive into that ADHD iceberg and exploring what's going on underneath. I will be diving deeper into each of these challenges and providing much more solutions in future videos. So do hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you get reminded of future videos.